So without further ado, I've asked them to kind of take a couple minutes and introduce themselves, and then we're going to do a little kind of Q&A with them. And then if you guys have questions and stuff you're curious about, just jump on in, and we'll have a fun little discussion with it. So.
Hi everybody, my name's John Porcellino. I do a comic called King Cat. There's a bunch of issues down there. And I've been drawing King Cat since May of 1989 was the first issue, so I'm coming up. Assuming I make it like another 6 months, I'll hit the 20th anniversary. And I came into comics through like kind of fine arts and punk rock and stuff like that, and I don't know. The short version is like I studied art my whole life and stuff like that, and by the time I got to be about 22 years old, there were a lot of things about the art world that made me uncomfortable, and meanwhile I'd always been drawing these little comics and making little self-published zines and things like that, and at some point it just clicked for me, like, this is the perfect medium for me to make my art in. And so I quit painting cold turkey and went into focusing on my comics as my art form, and I've been doing it ever since.
This is always the hardest part for me. I'm Noah Van Sciver. I also did a lot of paintings before I started doing comics, but comics is kind of a family thing, kind of grew up with it, so it's really familiar for me. And I just started drawing them. I'm actually just now starting to realize like what I can do with it. I've been sort of stretching out, doing whatever I want, and I do a comic book Blammo and 4 Questions and Westward, and I don't know what else to say about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both for coming in. We're really excited to have you tonight. So, I guess, yay! One question I had that I was kind of interested in, I was to kind of prep for this, I was reading a bunch of your back issues and whatnot, and I was thinking about sort of autobiographical comics as a genre. And whenever I think about autobiographical comics, I always think of Robert Crumb and Joe Matt, who are both like total sexual perverts. God love them. And you guys do kind of like this different subgenre of autobiographical comics where it's not, you don't necessarily touch on those issues. I guess I'm just curious if that's like if you guys were inspired by those people, but then decided to sort of take it in a different way, or sort of how you ended up doing the type of autobiographical work that you do.
I was definitely inspired by Robert Crumb. That was like some of the first stuff that kind of, because being from my family was more superhero comics, and it wasn't until like I saw that Harvey Pekar book that had like a Robert Crumb comic in it that that like switched something in my head where I could like, I can just do this whole other stuff. I don't have to do superheroes, And so that really was like a turning point for me, and I started doing like autobiographical stuff a little bit later on, but kind of trying to get away from that, not do like, because it seems like everybody's doing that, it's like we were talking about yesterday, like it's like everybody's doing this stuff, and so I'd rather just move it into like autobiographical, but make it more like it's fiction, so people don't know that this stuff really happened. It seems like it'll actually make my work stand out more, I think. I don't know. You wanna?
For me, I don't really know how I ended up doing autobiographical comics. It just was what came natural to me. I mean, so like definitely early on, it was a mix of fictional stuff and autobiographical. Although truthfully, kind of like Noah was saying, like even the fictional stuff probably had, like most writers, it had some basis in some experience I had, or a friend of mine had, or something like that. And then I was always interested in what in my head was this like idea called true life, like real life, like, which I don't exactly know how I could explain it, but the autobiographical thing I think stemmed from that. Like I was really interested in just the actual experience of being alive and somehow translating that into this art form that could be shared. And as far as being inspired by other autobiographical cartoonists, I can say actually, like when I started doing King Cat, a lot of people would write to me and say, you know, you must have read Harvey Pekar stuff. You got to check this out, because at the time he was one of the only people who was regularly doing that stuff. Like R. Crumb and stuff was still doing things, but I think Pekar had the focus for this autobiographical thing was on Harvey Pekar did his comic American Splendor, and for years I refrained from ever cracking on American Splendor because in some weird way I was just like I didn't want people to think that I was just like aping this guy, which I don't know that people thought that's what it was, and certainly I wasn't, but it was just like somehow I felt like it's gonna like sully what I'm doing if I see somebody else doing this kind of thing. And you know, I remember at one point in the early 90s, probably, Chester Brown, who was doing Yummy Fur, started doing autobiographical comics, and I just thought, oh. Like, and, you know, everybody's gonna think I'm copying this guy now or something. I had some kind of goofy thought like that. And
so you were reading Yummy Fur back then it was coming out?
Yeah. I remember actually writing to Chester to get like some of the back issues that I couldn't find at the store. And so for me, it just